I decided to go for a bike ride. It was a nice day, and as I got to riding the bike, I found out I had a low tire. So I stopped at the Ohio station across from the post office where McDonald's is now, and to pump air. And I had noticed lots of vans going down Main Street and turning out Lincoln. I didn't think much of it, and two former students were working at the Ohio station at that time. So I was asking them, what's the deal? And they said, well, there's a KISS concert.
And I was just a young cop at the time. Well, I remember the chief telling us that the musical group KISS was coming to Ohio Northern, and we were going to be part of a security team to just typical, just like basketball game security. Little to our surprise, it was going to be a little bit more than that.
At that point, a van pulled in. And it was, one of those psychedelically painted jobs. And a guy got out asking for the restroom. Well, when he opened the door, there were two girls in there in various states of, they were changing their clothes. Well, this perked up the two young fellows that were there at the gas station. So anyway, I thought, I got to find out what's happening. So I just rode my bike out Lincoln, and Kinghorn, that was the first thing. It had just opened. It hadn't been open very long, I don't think. I think it was the first big thing there, and it was just surprising.
I went straight there. I was way early, 2-3 hours early. Looked like they were setting up chairs. So I thought, you know what, I'll just go in and help. So I'm setting up chairs and I'm acting like I'm supposed to be here. And then later on, we were all done, and I could tell they were getting ready to do something on stage because they had amplifiers were set up and stuff. And somebody was getting ready to do a sound check because, I heard sororities were kind of like checking guitars. And by then I had kind of mingled my way back to the mixing board, which was up on scaffolding in the back. And I'm looking up there and I'm thinking, man, it looks pretty cool. And the guy looked down at me and I go, how is it up there? And he said, pretty good, come on up. And I'm like, okay. And so he let me come up there and I was checking out some stuff. And I remember KISS came in without their makeup and they did a sound check. And I didn't realize it was them because not too many people had ever seen KISS without makeup, ever. I ended up watching all 3 shows up on that mixing board platform. He came in and he was dressed like he had his face painted up like Gene Simmons because he had yelled at me about, how did you get up there? And I'm like, I've been here since 2 o'clock this afternoon, dude. And then the flock came on and the show started after everybody came in.
Also, when I did my shirt like Peter Criss, and I shredded the sleeves, and we were front and center. We got the best seats in the house.
Yeah, some of my fondest memories was I'm a sophomore in high school. The night of the concert, I was a high school baseball player. Me and my 3 fellow teammates were going to go to the concert, and that's before our baseball game. That's all we could talk about is the KISS concert. KISS this, KISS that. And we played Elida that night, and we go out and we get beat. A game that we might have, should have, could have won, but didn't win. And our coach was ready to kill us the next Monday because if I hear one more thing about that KISS concert, you guys are gonna. I can't say that. It's things that he said I cannot repeat. But he was very ticked at us for losing the ball game because we weren't on the game. No, I had a baseball game, and like I said, we just got done with the game, jumped in our cars. We didn't even take showers. We drove straight to the game. Straight to the concert.
I was just ready to turn 16. We just completely were blown away. 75 at the Toledo Sports Arena. We were eager for them to come back. So the way we found out about it was we went to Toledo to buy the new album, because we knew that was coming out because the magazine said so. And it's like, hey, they're coming in concert down in Ada on the 9th of May. So we buy the album, and it was so we had to buy the tickets then too. Got the tickets, and then we had to figure out how we were going to get from Wasion to Ada and back. My friend Norm Scheid, he was the same guy who took us over to get the album, the Kiss album. We got him talking and driving us down to Ada.
I think we had like 2 FM stations that you could probably pick up around here at that time period. And most cars didn't even have an FM radio in them. You had an AM radio in it. I was 16 and I turned 17 that month, so I was pretty much about 17. At the time, I think we were all shocked that they were showing up in Little Ada. I don't remember exactly if we really got that much choice in the seating, because they ended up in the bleacher areas of the seating, but they had all the folding chairs down on the floor. Well, yeah, the place was completely packed.
I remember wanting to go to that concert. My parents wouldn't let me go. I was in junior high. Although one of my buddies went, who was in the video.
I would have been in just at the end of my 7th grade year. So, in 75, that would maybe, what, about 12, 13-ish?
Back then, bands would put out albums like 2 or 3 a year. And they would tour, because we were in the what was called the Iron Triangle of Detroit, Cleveland, Toledo. And so bands would play constantly. They would just keep going back and forth between those 3 cities.
We really didn't know, nor did our parents, what we were getting into. I think I probably had the tickets before I convinced my parents, that it was okay for me to go, because they were not convinced. And then this parent of a classmate went along, but I do remember trading the second ticket for an Army Bugle, because I was playing taps for military funerals. That was my first paying job, playing taps at funerals. And anyway, yeah. So as long as I was holding one ticket at the end, I was happy.
Well, you just jogged my memory, because that's exactly where the tickets came from. Mind Dust Records and Elida. Anything off the wall music-wise you could find there.
Oh, Mind Dust Music. Okay, that was probably, yep, no, I did talk about that. That is probably where we got it, because back then, Mind Dust Music was out in Elida.
I didn't prepare much at all myself, but my one friend that went with me, there was a group of them that were coming over, and they all decided they were going to paint up like Kiss characters. So they spent all day getting painted up, and actually they looked pretty good, but they also decided to party all day while they were doing that. When I picked him up, I think it was a little bit of a long evening for him at times.
Most of these people had their faces painted. They weren't all like Kiss characters, but all this stuff, and I'm thinking, this is hardcore, fanship here.
Rolling Stone, he showed up with his face green. I said, "This ain't Devo. This ain't Devo, Raleigh." I said, you gotta do some touch up on that.
I suppose people that weren't real sure about what was going on, that just added to the attractions they was coming for, or the distraction as they was coming through the door.
And one time I ran out of grease paint, and I used model paint for my black on my eyes. And I tell you, boy, I don't recommend that. I had to use lighter fluid to get it off. I was like in pain. Oh my God, I'm gonna go blind taking my makeup off. We used to ride around the square up here at Kenton with our faces painted. When we have our class reunion, they always ask who was it that did that. I said that was me and Ike Hamilton and Jack Rensing and.
Myself being the first concert I ever went to in my entire life, me being just 14 years old with a date. Well, we didn't come in the main door. We came in kind of the back door. We'd been the southeast door of the Kinghorn Center at that time, because we didn't have the field house. So we came in that door, and I think that's where a lot of college students came in. And the main doors out by the flagpole off the parking lot was where the main door was, and they were actually checking for alcohol and stuff at that door, but I just don't remember that being the case at the back door, and I think they weren't prepared for that.
Coming in the door, it just seeing this gauntlet of deputy sheriffs, 6 on each side, just patting everybody down, and and then this kid in front of me, a couple of them, he painted his face like Gene Simmons, and and nobody did that back then. That was pretty new, but now it's more common. And I knew Sheriff Baldrige. I'd gotten my fingerprinting merit badge when I was in junior high, and he looks at that guy. He gets this contorted look on his face, and he's like, "Grab that guy!" And he sent several of the deputies over and threw him up against the wall. And it was just because his face was painted there. They kind of went like that, They patted him down there, and we just kind of walked on. It wasn't our business what was going on there, but I'm sure he was, just coming to a concert, just enjoying the show.
Well, they've always tried to do that. They've always tried to catch you walking in the door, with something, Hey, can't take that,
The crowd started building way early in the afternoon. Our job was basically no cans, no bottles, no smoking, and if we saw anybody smoking, we were supposed to walk up to them, tell them to, douse a cigarette. Smoking wasn't allowed in here. If we have to tell you again, you'll be kicked out of the concert. But we did not expect what went on that night from a small town police department standpoint.
There were semi-trucks that said KISS on them. I think they were black. And I thought, man, this is heavy-duty stuff. We walked in, took a look around. The gentleman, the parent with us, looked up at that radio booth and said, "We're going there." We climbed up a little metal ladder, that may be the same ladder that's there now, and got in this open cagey booth. And that's where we sat. There were some rickety folding chairs there, just the basic tan folding chair. And I don't even know if there were enough chairs for all of us. A couple of us may sat and dangled our legs over the front, and there was a railing to it. And everybody else that tried to crawl up there, he told them, "This is a private booth. No entry, sorry."
There were people all around, basically Kinghorn, like on blankets and that. They didn't have a ticket to come in, but the noise would be so loud that they could actually hear the concert from outside.
It was very chaotic in the very beginning trying to find a seat, but I ended up down within probably 10 or 12 of the front rows right in front of the stage. We were trying to watch the concert, but there was so much other stuff going around us, it was just you were just constantly seeing different things going on.
I think there were a lot of Rush fans. I don't remember any warning, any announcement ahead of time that Rush wouldn't be there. They just weren't.
But I did know that Rush was not going to be here, and that I don't know if we heard during the day or if we heard it coming in that night, maybe standing in line out here, that they weren't here. They weren't coming.
I happen to know one of the men who worked at Northern at the time. I think he ran Kinghorn or McIntosh Center. I think he did. Anyway, he was standing there. Anyway, I got in, and there were no seats or anything, so I just went in. I just had a pair of shorts and t-shirt on, and I stood inside, right inside the doors to the gym. Came home, just leaned against the wall there and see it. And the crowd was really restless, and evidently who they had come to see, I think it was Rush, didn't show. And so there was another group, and it wasn't the James Gang or anybody like that, it was somebody else. And the natives were a little bit restless as a result.
Coming in, and then all of a sudden the band you came to see to open the show wasn't there. Not a good way to start a show.
Yeah, I remember them. There's a big organ type, I don't know if it was, one of the old Hammonds, but it was like a rock organ. There was a violin player, an acoustic violin.
I just thought that they were one of the warm-up bands. I was like, okay, they're a warm-up band coming out, that's all this is.
Kind of a little esoteric in their approach with their instruments and the music, and I do remember them.
The Flock was mellow, and the people weren't ready for mellow to begin out, but I liked it. I really liked it. James Gang took you up to the next level. Walk Away, Funk 40 now, and all that. Oh, James Gang actually reversed the the direction that, I say, the flock maybe had taken the show. The show was going downhill, and at that point it turned back around and started going uphill pretty rapidly. But it was turning into more of a good rock concert at that point, because there was a lot of uneasiness, maybe.
You know, these guys were kind of the typical cool. There wasn't anything put on. They were just in jeans and T-shirts, but had the long, you know, shoulder length, a lot of that 70s hair, I think. And
But then James Gang came out, and especially for those of us who not only had seen him in Toledo, but had purchased their album, really liked it. Really liked it. I recorded the whole performance of the James Gang. So you hear us talking and yelling and cheering and singing over badly over their song.
just a garage band that was really good enough to be in front of thousands of people. Yeah, we're just going to come out and play music, and we're cool, and you're going to know it.
And when the James Gang played, when they finished up, they had an American flag, and they threw it into the audience, and Mark got the flag from James Gang, and he hung it up in his bedroom.
Comes crawling out like a military crawl across the stage. He had an army helmet on and a little American flag, and he has a six-pack of beer. I don't drink beer, but it's red, white, and blue was Pabst or something, you know, American color canned beer, and holds that over, and you know, right away 6 people grab those.
And in my checking the tour bus, and I happened to walk up inside, and as soon as I walked in the door, I got the pungent odor of marijuana, which typical motorhome type table there was an ashtray, and I think there might have been some beer bottles or some other stuff around, glasses, and in the ashtray was a pipe. So I picked up the pipe, and it had a pungent odor coming from it, and I thought, well, you know, it's marijuana paraphernalia, and it's in plain view. Young officer, I just picked it up and put it in my pocket, and it was on display at the police department for years, and was finally going to be destroyed or thrown away, and I saved it from the trash. But it was kind of fun through the years that we would always point at that pipe that was on our display board, that was the pipe taken from the Kiss bus at the concert here in Ada. And
what I saw mostly down in the crowd was every once in a while you'd hear bottles breaking, and it seemed like people were slamming bottles to the floor after they drank them. So there's your, you know, security. I'm sure they tried to keep that glass out of here.
And you could hear, I think, glass hitting the floor quite a bit.
The air was very hazy, and from who knows what, you know, reasons, but some of it was their fog and all that.
well, people were smoking, and initially officers would tell them to go put it out, but then the crowd would get booing and all that at the officers, and trying to get through the crowd as large as it was. And finally it was just, you know, it's going to happen, so just let it happen. Let's get it over with.
And I do remember a lot of marijuana being openly smoked in the venue itself, and me being just 14 years old with a date that I had brought to the concert with me.
Back then, for the good or the bad of it, we all smoked cigarettes. It's 1975. All the teenagers are smoking. Anybody in their 20s is smoking cigarettes. When we came in here, I'm going to say that there wasn't one person who ever thought about walking back outside to smoke a cigarette. So I think the cigarettes got lit up first. And a little ways into it, then the odor of the cigarettes changed pretty drastically to the point of where you probably couldn't breathe in here too much, and you might as well have been sitting in a giant bong in there, because that's what it was.
Yeah, because you could go to concerts back then, and, you know, you just walk into the place and
Everybody that walked out of there that day probably had a contact high of one sort or another, because it was that heavy with the smoke in there.
They put their cigarettes out on the basketball floor, and they had to refinish it.
You know, the noise was just so bad. The crowd was getting kind of, well, it wasn't like going to the Liberace concert up at Lyra. It was entirely different. It was just more rowdy. People were passing cigarettes back and forth. They were, you know, smoking. The odor. When you're right down at the stage, the band was very loud. Pyrotechnics, and let's just get me out of here. There was some officers that were trying to settle one group down, and I know the sheriff got hit in the head by a beer bottle. We'd take cigarette butts and put them in our ears. But had we known, we'd have probably had earplugs. And you could probably go in and pull people out and anger the crowd, but there was, let's let it happen and let's get out of here, you know. And it's, maybe taking that kind of attitude, I think, probably saved more problems in the long run.
The roadies, the work those guys had to do, not only to set the thing up, but to rotate. Like, you had 3 bands here.
We set up in the bleachers during the Flock and James Gang, and after the James Gang got done playing, everybody down front just sort of left. And I just slapped my buddies. I said, "Let's go!" And we virtually walked. It was like it was a free ticket to be right on stage at the best seat in the house. And we, you know, in those days they didn't have barriers, and we were right on the stage.
Then the lights go out, and there was one very dim blue light at the back of the stage. So you could just see shadows on the stage. You know, the guy makes the entrance, you know, makes the intro, you know, you wanted the best, you got it, you know, here's Kiss. And, you know, the lights come up and the band starts playing, and I think they broke into Strutter first thing, if I remember right. But they knew the audience was just going bananas. And I remember this clearly, that everybody was just dumbstruck. And, you know, there was a group of us that were just going bananas. We're up on our chairs. We're jumping up and down. We're yelling. We're screaming. You know, we're rocking out. We're having a great time.
Their appearance immediately caught my attention. And I thought, you know, that's unusual. You know, a rock and roll group looked like Kabuki. And then they fired up their flamethrowers, you know,
and I was lucky enough, I was pretty much right, not pretty much, I was right on stage in front of Gene Simmons, and it was amazing. It was like a god there.
Gene Simmons blew fire. It singed my eyebrows.
They had some huge gas burners that would belch flames and just kind of rise. And I remember toward our side of the stage, there was a girl up just kind of swaying and dancing with music. These speaker stacks would get progressively smaller as you got toward the treble side at the top. And she's on this speaker stack and just dancing, and all of a sudden these flames belch up, and I just see her hair. I see about 3 feet of flame, poof, off the top of her head. She jumps down off the speakers, and I never saw her again. So I'm assuming that 70s hairspray.
When I later found out, to my great surprise, that it was in Ada that Kiss was the first time they ever played Rock and Roll Night and Party Every Day.
While they were performing, he takes his mic and he points his mic out like to the audience, and I grabbed his slimy mic and then he pulled it back real quick. So
I'm like, okay, this is my chance to get my souvenir. So I tear off my shirt and I jump down off my chair and I run to the front of the stage. I leap up and I grab the front of the stage somehow and I haul myself onto the stage in front of Gene Simmons, and he's looking down at me like, uh-oh, what is this guy going to do? And I crawl up to him, and they're still playing. They're slowing down. I'm still playing, and I wipe up the stage with my shirt. The roadies saw it, and they were I happened to catch a glimpse at their faces, and you know their eyes are getting real big. They had not expected this at all. I look up, I give Gene a quick wave, and I turn around and I hightail it off the stage, and you know our little mosh pit there, and I have my trophy in my hand. I have my bloody Kiss shirt.
I remember that. Some fan jumps up. He gets up and he rubs his shirt in it. I remember that. Mops his shirt, this blood up with his shirt.
Ed took his t-shirt off and mopped it up off the stage, and he said, "Keith, I'm gonna wear that to school. I'm gonna wear that to school tomorrow."
And I remember now being a bit of a celebrity because of it. Well, as much of a celebrity as you can be in high school, right? And I kept that shirt long time, and somehow Mom found it and saw it and said, "Oh, I've got to see if I can get this out for him," and washed it. I remember being just so crushed that she had ruined my trophy.
Some of the KISS fans with the painted faces were crawling up on the far side of the stage and running across the edge and jumping back down into the crowd. And I think they were getting wider paths, getting over closer to Gene Simmons on that side. And KISS had some stagehands that just, to me, looked enormous, you know, like Arnold Schwarzenegger type people. And they got a hold of one or two of them and just put them out, launched them into the audience. I do remember that. I know that happened at least once, and that ended it.
It was hot. And I mean the song, pardon me, but Harder Than Hell, it was hotter than that there.
You can't explain, you know, when they fired up the pyro, you know, and all that stuff, you know, that was like new stuff back then. And it would send your eyebrows off if you was too close, but they didn't care.
The heat in here was incredible, and a lot of those folks, their makeup was just running.
Really?
All these, you know, these painted faces. There were both genders, male and female, with them painted, and a lot of them were crowded right at the stage, and it was hot in here.
When KISS came on, the pyrotechnics and stuff there, oh, they rocked the show. They just were incredible there.
But it was cutting edge at the time. This was kind of going a step beyond.
60s, people a lot of times before Woodstock would just go and just sit. And you didn't hear anything. And they didn't participate. And maybe at the end they'd a courtesy clap, you know. Now you start moving into the 70s and things are changing rapidly. And I'm not saying that they were waves carrying people around yet, but I mean, they were fist pumping and hooting and hollering, yelling, screaming, whistling, whatever you want to call it. They were starting to participate in the shows.
But, and to me, they were very much a live band. You listen to a KISS album, you see them live, that's what KISS was. So what they did was very polished.
Keith became a massive KISS fan because of that.
Well, I've seen them 7 times after that.
Of all the groups that we've seen all over the years, I mean, we've seen a lot of different groups all over the place, but KISS is just one of those that just like sticks with you. You know?
The show, that was what got KISS going. They had their hook. That's what got them going.
Live. And it was just simple guitar music, vocals with the riffs and the lead playing of Ace, Frehley in there, and it was the real stuff. So
they sounded like KISS that night. Everything about them. They sounded like the album, practically every song.
Seeing KISS for the first time, we knew the music, but once you got over there and saw it, and the pyrotechnics was so loud, the fire was so hot, it was impressive.
You know, people would come out and they'd say, clap your hands and blah, 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 do this. These guys would actually say, get up, clap your hands, holler, and it's like, whoa, okay, you got to really participate. These guys mean business.
It was just awesome. That's all there is to it, Never seen something like that before and probably never will again.
And they could pull off the theatrics while they were doing that, because there was a lot of, they had these huge platform things in this tight, I don't know, it's partly spandex, leather, whatever, and sequins and bright, things that reflected in lights all over their clothing. And, they'd put their legs out and rock and strut and step with those great big heels and all of that bigger-than-life stage antics that went on.
It was like they demanded your participation. They demanded your attention. It's like, you're not going to pay $5 and sit on your can. You're going to get up and rock, And not only they rock and rolled all night, partied every day. They did it.
It seemed like there was always a group of kids somewhere that played music. Now, I wasn't one of them, but there was always somebody somewhere who'd put a band together. You don't have that nowadays. I never hear that at all anymore. But I think that also kind of fed into this whole thing too. But
I've played guitar since I was 12 and play, fairly seriously acoustic.
Back then, all the Vietnam and everything was going on, and the groups, and you had to keep your sanity one way or the other. So you got into music.
I see those influences from the 70s and that rock music in my playing even now.
Really?
Yeah, it's made me a more well-rounded player.
Oh, I played bass. We had a little band going on. Oh, yeah. Me and a couple buddies around here. We played the hymns.
The Hymns?
Hymns, HIMZ.
Oh.
Oh yeah, yeah. I hope you don't drag nothing up on that.
I'm gonna look.
Even the guy that went with us to the Kiss concert, he played drums.
Huh.
That was Bob Hoppe. He played drums, and Jerry Lorber played guitar, and Tom Mustang played guitar. Oh yeah.
Oh no, I played guitar.
There's not ever going to be a concert like that here ever again.
I know the band. I used to know the bands. I knew who was in the band. I knew what labels they were on, and I knew the names of the songs. All right, but I listened and I was a big drummer fan back then. I played drums, so I listened to the drum kit, whoever the drummer player was, and then the other instruments, and then how they blended.
But he got to see Kiss, so that was really the main one that we wanted to see there.
I didn't go to a concert again for a lot of years.
I guess that's might be what a Kiss concert was all about. I've never been to one. That's the only one I've been to. So
After the concert that night, a young man breaks through that window and just kind of smashes through that door into her living room. She's sitting there watching TV and is just horrified. My cousins, there are 3 of them, were upstairs asleep, but he is talking about spilling his blood and freeing his soul, and he started banging on walls in her living room. There were places in her walls with these big asymmetrical holes where he'd beaten it clear down to the board, the lath board behind, blood around it. He'd cut himself getting in. He knocked out several holes in walls in that living room and then moved left into a kind of a sitting room, did the same. She said, I remember my aunt telling us, I'm just in a panic. She said, there's a piece of driftwood there, there's a baseball bat. I pick up a pillow and start, beating him on the back from behind, yelling at him. She said he didn't even know I was there. And so he knocked several holes in the wall in the next room, kicks a window out, and he's gone. And out he went.
Oh, exactly.
No, she did not see the concert as a positive thing. And then, of course, my parents see it as less positive after that as well.
Dr. Meyer was very conscious about public image and maintaining the proper type of perspective for a place like Ohio Northern University. And I don't think that a musical group like KISS would fit into that way of thinking, what he was interested in promoting. As the way things transpired, I think he was quite shocked as to the type of concert it turned out to be. He was not happy at all about the concert. But people were saying who had come in contact with him, and the subsequent statements that we would not have another concert like that on campus.
The night of the concert, we took a ride out here. We were on Lincoln Avenue. We turned off on the street here just into the sports center and drove up to the Circle. And right at the Circle, at the intersection, there's this Volkswagen van sitting there with the big sliding door open, and some guy sitting there like this. He had a Confederate flag behind him, and he looked like he was just way out of it. And I remember my dad saying, "See, now that's why you're not going to this concert."
1977, America. Doobie Brothers from 78. Jethro Tull from 1978. Sports Arena Heart from 78. A lot of 78, you notice that? Ooh, 77 Doobie Brothers at Bowling Green. Boston. Yeah. This is Styx from 78. Rush. I finally got to see Rush from 1981 at Cobo Hall in Detroit. Memories, man. Another Rush. A lot of times I'd write who was on there. Like there's Pat Benatar. I wrote it on this one. Blossom Music Center. Journey at Blossom. Point Blank. They opened for him. Now there's a deviation. A lot of people go, why do you have that? Randy Springer, Mind Us Music Again. Said, you want to go see Miles Davis? I said, who's Miles Davis? And Rolling Stones. Cobo, or not Cobo, that was Silverdome. So you just tell me when you want me to stop. I just